Welcome everyone to the third episode of the We Rush In podcast with your host Dan Gignard. Very excited to have Rick Hawes on the show with me today. Rick is a former police officer with the Estevan Police Service in Saskatchewan who had 20 years on the job prior to a PTSD diagnosis. He went on to build a meaningful life outside of policing when his injuries prevented him from continuing on within his chosen career. I want today's episode to serve as proof that those who are struggling can build a life outside of policing. Good afternoon, Rick. How are you?
Doing pretty good. How are you doing, Tim?
Not too bad. Well, like I said, I just want to have a conversation with you about life after policing.
Okay.
Maybe just start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was with EPS in uniform for 17 years and then out of uniform on and off after I got sick for another 3. So I got out in 2007 is when I got out and wound up in health and safety. And now I'm living in Edmonton and I do health and safety for a couple of companies. And yeah, it's really good.
Awesome. That's great. Just to clarify for the audience here, EPS, a lot of people will think we're talking about Edmonton Police Service, but because I used to work in Alberta, but Estevan Police Service, small town, southeast Saskatchewan.
You betcha.
Where
about
I used
12,000 people, I think.
Yeah, I think they're still sitting around there. It jumped up a little bit when the oil was high, but
yeah. I don't think it's there anymore.
No, exactly. And like I said, we're just hoping to provide a little insight into policing. Or sorry, not policing, but life after policing, with a PTSD diagnosis. And I think a lot of guys feel like it's kind of the end for them, like they don't know what to do because they've always been a cop and never been anything else, right? So
yeah, I can totally relate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like when WCB finally decided that they were going to retrain me, and so that was it. I resigned and everything else like that. And I hadn't really given any thought to what I was going to do now that I grew up, like it's always, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I grew up. And so I never really gave it any thought because it was the only thing that I'd ever really done. And so my handler with WCB, he got a hold of me and he said, okay, we need to know right now. Like he came to my house and he had a stack of course calendars from pretty much every school in Western Canada and said, pick one. And I said, are you serious? I said, I just found out that I'm done, that my career is over. I'm not going back. And now I have to pick my next career, like right now. He said, yeah.
That's unreal.
And I got a little upset, a little short with the guy. And so anyway, I picked up the course catalog because I asked him a bunch of questions. Like I always wanted to be a teacher, psychologist, and that type of thing, and it didn't work out for various different reasons, and they were all WCBs. And so I picked up the first calendar that I found. It was SIAS, and I was flipping through that, and commercial pilot came up. And I was like, hey, I always wanted to learn how to fly. Yeah, all right. So I picked up the phone and I phoned the guy. It was about a half hour later or something like that. And I said, I want to be a commercial pilot. He said, okay. He said, put it together, send us a proposal and go from there. So I did a little bit of research, and one of the schools that I'd been talking to gave me some information on potential salary expectations and that type of thing. And I thought, oh, okay. Yeah, that'll work. But it turns out that those expectations were somewhat inflated. And because I talked to some people, I'd gone through private school and now I was going through a commercial school.
Oh, okay.
And I had a chance to talk to some private pilots, and they weren't making anywhere near the money that I was told I could make. So I'm not doing this. And so I left WCB and I went to work for a guy that I knew who owned a trucking company.
Okay.
And drove for him, and I made some connections in the oil patch, and I wound up with a company in Estevan as an equipment operator. I thought, never done that before. That sounds interesting. So I give that a try. And then from there, they offered me the position of health and safety coordinator, which I took. I thought, yeah, okay, that's a natural progression. Mm-hmm. And I did that job for about a year. And then I was promoted to regional health and safety manager, which was all of Canada, and transferred to NISCU and never looked back.
Sounds great.
So, yeah. And they wound up, I enrolled in university 30 years after I graduated high school. Here I am going to university and found out that I actually liked it. It was enjoyable. So the company paid for a good portion of the university, but then with the downturn in business and everything else like that, the education programs, they dried up. So I finished it myself, and I finished university in, I think it was 2016 when I finished university. I applied to the Canadian, the Board of Canadian Registered Safety Professionals.
Right. And
they accepted my application. A couple of months later, I wrote the exam. I passed the exam, and I got my designation as a safety professional.
Nice.
So that's what I've been doing ever since, and it's just kind of evolving from that company. Because of the downturn and everything else like that, they were eliminating positions, and unfortunately mine was a luxury. And so my position was eliminated, and then I got on with another company loosely affiliated to the oil field. They were a manufacturing company, and I was the global health and safety manager. Okay. And so I did that for a couple of years, and tough times hit again. And so a lot of the operations and everything were moved to the U.S. And then I decided to retire. And I found out that I'm not designed to retire. It was just, oh man, I've never been so bored. Right. And so I went back to work, and I'm working for an oil field reclamation company now, and I'm loving it.
Yeah. So is that like reclaiming old well sites and things like that? Or?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, okay. They go in and they old abandoned well sites and that type of thing. They oversee the reclamation of that and put it back to nature.
Right. Yeah, and I think
really kind of cool.
It's just the whole getting retrained thing. For myself, even straight out of high school, I kind of did a few things, but nothing really that I could fall back on. Right. So I think that's a daunting thing for a lot of guys as well. Is like, okay, so. Even if it's not a PTSD diagnosis, maybe it's just you're not
designed for it. You're not built for it
anymore, or it's just you maybe
it's not for you.
Not for you
and it's
anymore.
Very possible.
Yeah, exactly. And then what do you do, right? Like some guys are lucky enough to have gone to university, things like that. They can fall back on something. Guys
or
like me,
wise enough.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
No worries. Just guys like me who like. I turned wrenches for a couple years, and I was a carried by trade, but like none of those pay as well as what this does, right? So
I didn't have a trade. I got out of high school, and I went to work on the rigs,
right?
And I went to work service rigs and that type of thing, and I did that long enough to know that I would never ever do that again. And so the policing job came up, and I decided to do that. And then you get to the point where you've almost got, the golden handcuffs on, where you've got so much time in that you can't leave.
For sure. Yeah.
But, I didn't have anything to fall back on. So I went to school a little bit late.
Right. But there's no such, is there such thing though? Really?
Not anymore, because there was a couple of classes there. Believe it or not, I wasn't the youngest person in the class.
Well, there you go.
That really made me feel good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's there, but I think for me the biggest problem was I don't want to say ego or anything like that, but I just couldn't accept that I couldn't do this anymore. It's the type A personality and everything else like that, and you just you stay in the fight, right? You're always fighting, always. Backup's always coming, so you never give up the fight. And it's hard to accept yourself. Allow yourself to do that.
Well, and I think what happens is it becomes part of your entire persona. Like, and you wear not only the thing, the badge and all that, you wear it sort of as a thing of honor, but it starts to become deeply ingrained as part of who you are, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of guys lose sight of just who they are on the outside of the job. And I think we're getting better, I think, at recognizing that guys need a hobby. Guys need to be able to do things outside of the job so that they can stay more than just a cop, right?
Yeah. I was lucky enough to get a piece of advice. I think it was from one of the lecturers at, I think it was the senior constable's course I was on in Regina. And the advice that he gave is don't let the job define you. Mm-hmm. You know, you work at this job. This is not what you are. I work for a police agency, you know, I'm employed as a police officer, but I'm me. And, you know, it's for me, it was always a way to put a roof over my family's head and make sure that my family was taken care of. I loved the job. You know, there was aspects of it that I loved. Absolutely. And there was other aspects that, I had a little bit of difficulty with. But I didn't let it define me. Like, I wouldn't say that I'm a cop.
Right.
I work as a cop. Or when people ask me what I did for a living, if I didn't know who they were, I told them that I worked for the city.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
You know, I work for the city of Estevan. And a few years ago, I happened to be in a barbershop in the city here, and another guy came in, and he had his son in tow. He was 3 or 4, something like that. And he was a really good little kid, you know, and he's running around behaving himself and that type of thing. I struck up a conversation with the guy, and I asked him, I said, so what do you do? He said, I work for the city. And I just started to laugh. I said, what division are you in? He looked at me. I said, I used to tell people the same thing. So we laughed about that and just talked about the job for a while and that type of thing. But yeah, it was awesome. Kind of funny.
Yeah. I've definitely heard of other members sort of spinning kind of what they do to strangers, right? Not really revealing how or what it is they do.
Yeah, I've seen people. You tell them what you do for a living, and they just kind of recoil back.
Yeah, people don't know.
You know, they don't want to be around you or anything like that. And when people, it took me a long time to tell anyone that I suffered from PTSD, because you got this look in their eyes like, oh my God, you know, like you were gonna climb a water tower or something like that, and it's you know, and so that took a while to get over. But then I just come to the realization, you know what, your opinion of me means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, for sure.
I really don't care what you think of me. When I look at myself in the mirror, I like the person that I see looking back.
For sure.
That's all that counts.
That's all that really matters at the end of the day.
Exactly.
I think we're getting a lot better on the whole, oh my God, this guy has PTSD thing, you know, like sort of changing the narrative and understanding that people, it's not just, it's people are being labeled, and it's not just a label. Like, there's more to it than that, right? And I mean, we can still function and do our normal day-to-day stuff and move on with life.
Yeah, I mean, there's no different, you know?
For sure.
And it was difficult for me to accept, you know, initially. I mean, I was very much old school. Like, I started policing in the mid-'80s.
For sure.
And I know the first time that I figured out that, you know what, I might need to talk to somebody, I sat in the parking lot of the doctor's office for a half an hour, yelling at myself, berating myself for being weak, and that type of thing. And, you know, I mean, so that's the hardest thing to get over, is accepting it yourself. And then once you accept it, then that's your first step towards healing, I think. I
agree. You got to do your work, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sure. And then, and then once it was funny, because once I turned in my gear to the chief and told him what he knew was coming as well. Once I turned it in and I walked out of the station, it was like a weight of the world had been lifted off me.
I bet.
and it was just it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't oh my God, now what, or anything like that. It's over.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't have to worry about that phone ringing at 2:00 in the morning,
right.
or anything like that. It was over,
mm-hmm.
and now could start to heal.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you recently heard, I learned a new term that's being used. It's PTSI, just showcasing that it's really just an injury, and thus something that can be treated and then, moved past, which is a pretty big deal if you ask me.
I think a lot of the problem was that the perceptions that everybody had of PTSD were fed by Hollywood and the news media and that type of thing, which is sensationalism, And so once people come to the realization that it's just an injury, and then I like that term a lot better.
And I've just sort of just heard it just recently. I was at some in-service training, and the people that run Project Resilience 911, which is a group here in Manitoba, had brought it up. And then even the speaker who was speaking to us, he suffers from PTSD. He had a pretty serious incident overseas, and he even started just doing his best to use that term for the remainder of the talk, which I thought was really cool, because he's a pretty authoritative guy within the field of mental health and leadership and all kinds of stuff, and he just immediately picked up this new term and started using it. So I thought that was pretty.
Yeah,
I like
sweet. That term PTSI.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know what else. I noticed you said in your bio there that you run a little hobby on the side, a little business doing photography and stuff. That's
that's well. A lot of the skills, oddly enough, that I picked up in law enforcement have worked very well for me in health and safety, incident investigations, interviewing people, that type of thing, and it served me well. But the photography, I even did that when I was a cop. I got tired of, because I was trained as an ident photographer, right?
Right.
And so you're not exactly catching people at their best.
No, for sure.
I wanted to photograph live people. So I started doing family work and weddings and that type of thing. And then I thought, you know what, I can have more fun just photographing mountain scenes and that type of thing. So we did that and just set up a small online business where doing that type of thing, and loving it. That's really enjoying it.
That's cool. Yeah, I was actually going to kind of ask so how much of what you learned as a police officer then assisted you in the field you take? Because I think a lot of guys will, instead of completely switching, they want to try and find something that will still use what they learn, so they don't have to learn as much, or they feel like they're still using the skills they've acquired over the years, right? I've got 12 years on. I'd like to use some of those skills going forward, right?
No, and I think for us in law enforcement, I think we're really well positioned for positions like that, because number one, you learn how to talk to people, you learn how to interact with people. And so your interpersonal skills are always, excellent type thing. And so I've used that, my presentation skills, teaching, and that type of thing. And I find that a lot of what I picked up during my time in uniform has served me very well.
That's good. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think that's a concern for a lot of guys, is not just what am I going to do when I go back to school, but what can I do that lines up, right? Especially people that don't have a lot of other training. So it's good to remember that we are professional talkers. We're professionals at talking.
Exactly.
So pretty much any job where it involves relations with people is something that we could probably work into pretty good.
We interact with other people relatively well, and we are professional talkers, and we're usually talking ourselves out of the trouble our partner got us into. But
tell me about it. Yeah, that's definitely the case sometimes.
Yeah, and it was funny because I was conducting an incident investigation in NISCU here, and it was pretty simple, and I had a trainee with me. And this young guy, I'd worked with him in Estevan, and he transferred up to NISCU and that type of thing. And he was learning health and safety. And so I was interviewing this individual, and it kind of started to move from an interview, almost interrogation, where you kind of get into the guy's head,
yeah,
and you start pulling strings and that type of thing. And the young guy that was with me after the interrogation was over, because I let him sit in on it and just kind of watch, he looked at me, he said, "How the hell did you do that?" And I said, "Do what?" He said, and he was just absolutely amazed. And then he looked at me, he said, "Have you ever done that to me?" I said, "You don't know, do you?"
Yeah. So
yeah, it was kind of comical, but yeah, the interpersonal skills I find serve me very, very well.
Absolutely.
Some of the specialized skills that I picked up in ident and that type of thing work pretty well too when I'm doing incident investigations and that stuff.
For sure. Well, the analytical mind, right? The way to
exactly.
Just
it never goes away.
That's true.
Which is okay.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Putting it to good
these
use.
Skills they're always with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess, what else do you got planned? Like, what you said you can't retire, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I've got myself lined up for a course here in May.
Okay.
Where I'm going to become an external safety auditor. That's what this course is about. And so my plan for a few years from now is just set up my own little company where I'm doing health and safety audits, where I'm consulting, and that type of thing, where I just kind of work as much as I want to.
Oh, yeah.
And I can do a gig here, I can do a gig there, that type of thing, and if we want to take a month off and go somewhere, hey, we can do that. It's just something to keep me busy.
Perfect. Yeah, and that.
Yeah,
even for me, that's
keep my wife seen.
Yeah, that's the end goal for me too. Eventually, is something that I can do on the side and travel when I want to, right? So.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the plan. When I had that piece of retirement, I was really enjoying going out. A buddy of mine asked me to teach him how to take a photograph, so we did that and went out. But my wife was kind of feeling left out, so she asked me to teach her how to take a photograph and teach her all that stuff. So we've been doing that for a while. Unfortunately, it's been an absolutely crappy winter, so we haven't been able to get out.
Right.
And we're just waiting to get back out and start doing it again.
Is that something that you've done elsewhere, where you've put on sort of privately put on instructional sessions for photographing, or?
No, it's not. I never really gave it any thought. That's kind of my thing, and I keep it for me.
Absolutely.
And
I think you need to do that with some things, right? Like.
Yeah, some things you need to keep to yourself.
Yeah.
And my buddy, he just happened to. It was something that he wanted to get into, and he knew that I did it. So he asked me if I would mind, and I said no, I don't mind.
Right. You're doing it for a friend, right? So.
Sure. Yeah. And then when my wife come to me, she'd never mentioned anything like that before. I mean, she'd always been with me anytime we're doing any photo gigs or anything like that. She's always helping and that type of thing. But she never really expressed an interest in being behind the camera.
Right.
So when she did it, yes, by all means, let's go. Mm-hmm. And so we spend quite a bit of time. And I mean, there's some really nice parks in the city here, so we don't have to go that far.
That's pretty awesome. And then, I mean,
yeah,
now you kind of have like a bit of a shared hobby, which is also really nice to have,
exactly.
Right? Like,
yeah, we have a shared interest, and now when I want to buy a piece of camera gear, I can just show it to her and just
yeah, for sure.
I don't have to sneak it into the house.
No, yeah, and like even for my wife and I, we're really into the outdoors and the kayaking and things like that. So we have that mutual interest, which I think makes a huge difference, right? And it's the same thing where, I want this piece of camping gear or whatever, right? Like, it benefits everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
For sure. And
it's something to share. And like my wife and I, our 40th anniversary is in December, and people ask us, "Wow, what's kept you together so long?" And we're just joking, and we said, "Well, if you met our kids, you'd understand, because the agreement was whoever left first had to take the kids, and neither one of us were about to do that, so we stayed together. And then after the kids moved out, well, then we started joking. Oh, okay. Well, I had my dog, she had her dog, and we didn't really care for each other's dogs. Whoever left first had to take both dogs. Well, okay, well, that wasn't good, so we stayed together.
That's awesome.
And now that we're up here in the city, we both just, I don't want to go through the trouble of training somebody. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I often wonder about that, right? Like, people having to learn how to rebuild themselves as an adult post, like, kids leaving the house and stuff, right? Like,
my wife had a really, really tough time when our oldest left.
Right,
empty nest syndrome. Oh, yeah, she had a really tough time with that.
Yeah.
But when it come time for our twins, she don't let the door slam your ass on the way out.
She was ready at that point.
Yeah, she'd had a taste of it, and she wanted it.
Oh, that's awesome.
She already had plans. She was going to remodel bedrooms and everything like that, and they did not include keeping beds in them. So
that's fantastic.
It was funny. Oh yeah,
that
was a good time.
Perfect.
But yeah, it's I know when I first got my diagnosis, and like when I first filed the claim with WCB, it was one of the first ones that went in at that time, and it wasn't accepted. Like it wasn't as readily accepted as it is now. WCB didn't have policies in place and that type of thing. And when I filed my claim, I got a phone call one evening from the investigator, and went through it, and I was the one that was there. I was the one that went through it, and I didn't believe what I was saying.
Right.
It was just, and so I could tell that the guy was not believing what I was telling him.
Mm-hmm.
But, they wound up accepting the claim, and away we went from there.
Okay, yeah. And it's, I'm glad they accepted your claim. It's unfortunate that it still seems like years later, we're still... We're still finding cases where it's not accepted, where people are struggling and fighting to get the coverage or get the ability to move on, right?
It's almost like the old, like the old thought processes and the old stigmas associated to it are still hanging on there with some people.
Yeah, and I think it might be just a matter of understanding, like maybe. Mm-hmm. People that are in the position that those people are in WCB need more specific, or they need to have specific people that work there that deal with these particular cases and are well educated on these things specifically.
Oh yeah. And it's, WCB, but it's also, I think myself personally, I think it's the senior police leadership. They need, better education and recognizing, when someone is, because you don't just wake up one day and say, oh, okay, well, today's the day.
Mm-hmm.
It leads up, and I think the best thing that a leader could do would be to, if you recognize something out of the ordinary with one of your people, do something about it.
I agree, and I think we're getting better. I think we're trying. I just know there's some instances where I think what happens is the member sometimes, like not in every case, but becomes a poor performer, say, and there's probably a background reason to that.
Yep.
And then they get reprimanded, and then that happens a couple times, and they can't handle it anymore, and then they go off and they make this PTSD claim, and then management has got this perception that the claim is being placed just because they got in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just accepting the fact that it's probably a whole slew of things that led to this point, right? And you know,
like I remember when my first session with the psychologist, and the guy was absolutely amazing, and the session lasted for an hour and a half, and I talked for an hour and a half, and he wrote. He never said a word. He never interrupted me. Nothing. All he did was take notes. And at the end of the hour and a half, he said, "Okay." He said two things. First of all, wow. And second, he said, "How are you still alive?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, and it's just, but another problem that we shared is that it's the attitude towards the small towns.
Yeah.
You know, nothing ever happens in small towns. How you come from a small town? How can you have all this, you know, these problems? Nothing ever happens there. I mean, hell, we were told in a negotiating meeting one night, nothing ever happens in Estevan.
Yeah.
And you know,
and the problem with that is, especially coming from the public or the city workers, like the mayor, things like that, they don't understand. Police are only called to people's houses and things when it's the worst thing that's going on. The things that you can't even imagine are happening in your community.
No, that's right.
Right.
That's right. To this day, my wife doesn't know a lot of the stuff that happened. Yeah. And that type of thing. And I'll keep it that way.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like there's certain things that the public ought not know goes on, because it's not going to serve the public any for them to know just how bad things can be, right? Unfortunately, we've decided to take this on as a job to deal with things that people can't deal with, don't want to know exist to deal with, and it's just part of it's part of the gig, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, it gets to some people don't make it out of that. So
and you know, it's funny that one of the things that I had a lot of trouble dealing with was, why am I going through this but nobody else is? When, knowing what I know now, they were all going through it. We're just very good at hiding it.
100%. Yeah.
And that type of thing. And it's, you don't have to go through it.
Yeah, I say you're 100% on that. Like the whole "why am I? Why me?"
Yeah, why me?
Everybody's dealing with it in some shape, way, or form to some degree. So like at the end of the day,
there was some calls that I went on where I was actually dealing with survivor's guilt.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and that type of stuff, and it's a very rewarding life. It really is.
For sure. And like I said, you're loving everything you got going on now. You got good hobbies. I mean, I don't know about you, but I like the area you live in. Edmonton's got close proximity to such beautiful outdoors. Like, I just want, I want to give guys hope, you know, that if they're suffering, they can walk away from this job and they can build a life for themselves, right?
Yeah. And you know, if you're looking in the mirror in the morning and you don't recognize the person who's looking back at you, you know, it doesn't have to be that way.
For sure. Yeah.
And you know, you can heal from it. It's not. Yeah, it's not what it used to be.
No, exactly. And I think there's a lot more education happening, even with the people treating people. There's always new information, new therapies, things like that to help. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We just need to keep working at it.
We just need to keep moving there. It's like Winston Churchill said, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going.
Keep going. You'll come out on the other side, right?
Yep, you will come out.
Awesome.